Welcome to Travel Italia, the show about travel in Italy. Welcome back to the show. I'm Catherine, your host. For those of you who don't know me, or if you're listening for the first time, I'm an American expat who's lived in Italy for many years. I've traveled up and down this peninsula many times. And the reason I created this podcast is to help people like you prepare for your trip to Italy, to share tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. On today's episode, we'll be discussing a question that comes up during the summer months, because it is that time a year again when crowds of people come to visit Italy. It's the high season of the year, which is typically the summer. And this year, 2024, is on track to bust last year's record numbers of tourists visiting Italy. Here in Italy, there's a lot of talk and a lot of media attention about the record number of people visiting and all the challenges and problems that go along with so many visitors. In the last episode, I talked about Venice's new pilot day trip fee program for people visiting the city. So if you're headed to Venice this summer, you definitely want to check that out so you'll be prepared and informed before you arrive. The fact is that many places in Italy, not just Venice, are swamped with visitors during the summer months. Perhaps you've got a trip to Italy scheduled this summer and you might be thinking, oh no, what am I supposed to do? How can I avoid crowds? Well, on today's show, we're tackling that question. How can you enjoy Italy during the high season and reduce your exposure to mass crowds or avoid them altogether? Well, I have some tips and tricks for you to remember as you are finishing up your planning for your summer trip. So let's get started. The first tip I want to share with you is all about location. Yes, Italy is a popular place to be in the summer months, but remember that not all of the peninsula is equally crowded. There are some places that are lesser known and not as popular. So my first tip is to visit these lesser known, less popular locations. So for example, instead of Rome, Florence, and Venice, you could visit, just to give you an example, Bologna, Ravenna, Modena, or Ferrara, or all of them, because these cities are all in Emiglia-Romagna region, and they're all fairly close to each other. And they're popular towns with lots to see, but not nearly as crowded or as popular as Rome, Florence, and Venice. Just to give you an example, this region is home to some of Italy's most famous, most traditional foods like Parmesan cheese, lasagna, tortellini, and the list goes on. And it's also the home for you car lovers of Ferrari, Maserati, and Ducati motorcycles. They each have beautiful museums. So food and cars, and really there is so much to see. Architecture, history, it just goes on and on. These are smaller towns, and so they draw fewer visitors than the three that I mentioned earlier: Rome, Florence, Venice, just to give you an example. You'll have a different experience, less of a touristy experience, less crowded, but in my opinion, more of an authentic Italian experience without the mass crowds. So that is my first tip. You might be thinking, well, I've already made my plans. I'm going to Venice or Rome or Florence or Milan or Cinque Terre. Now what am I supposed to do? You're telling me that these places are going to be packed. That's okay. Don't despair. I have some other things that you can do to to have an enjoyable time and avoid crowds. So here we go. Let's go through this list. All right. So first thing is, if at all possible, avoid visiting a busy tourist area on a weekend. In general, more people are traveling on the weekends. And remember, you have people coming here not just from all over the world, but also just within Europe. People will say, hey, I'm going to go to Italy for the weekend. Maybe someone from Germany or the UK. So if you want to spend a days in Rome, let's just take an example. You want to spend a few days in Rome. I would avoid the weekend. I would stay over Tuesday and Wednesday or Wednesday and Thursday, avoid Friday. Unfortunately, Mondays is not that great because a lot of museums and restaurants are closed on Mondays. So if you have a list of museums that you want to visit and you're considering staying over a Monday, I would definitely check their hours in advance and don't assume that everything is going to be open. So first tip is avoid the weekends. Second thing you can do is, to avoid standing in line and crowded long lines, is to visit the websites of museums or other sites that you want to visit and buy your tickets in advance. A lot of places offer online scheduling and booking. And in many places, for example, the Uffizi in Florence, as you go in the entrances, there are two lines, one for people who have pre-booked and for those who have not. And believe me, the line for buying tickets at this time of year is considerably longer and, of course, a waste of your precious vacation time. So if you are buying your tickets online, I just want to make a side note here to buy them from the official website of the museum or whatever location you're going to, and not a third party seller. Also, I've found that museums and sites are usually less crowded towards closing time. So, if you don't want to be packed in like sardines as you're walking through St. Peter's, you can go in the late afternoon, right before closing time. Of course, check hours in advance. And the plus is if you're going to, say, a museum or visiting a church in the late afternoon, in the summertime in Italy, that just happens to be the hottest time of the day. So you can escape the heat, enjoy air conditioning while you take in some art or some history. So makes it a little bit more comfortable. Another tip is to visit high traffic areas in a city or popular spots, not in the middle of the day or during, let's say, I don't know, I want to say 9 a.m. to say 4 or 5 p.m. Okay. Or even later, I would say like 5 or 6 p.m. Let me give you an example. If you're in Venice, you want to visit the famous St. Mark's Square, which is the heart of Venice, right? It's iconic, it's beautiful. There's St. Mark's Cathedral, the Doge's Palace, the bell tower, the views of the gondolas all parked neatly beside each other. It's just absolutely stunning. But if you go to St. Mark's Square in the late morning, up until about 5 or 6 p.m., the square is absolutely jam-packed this time of year with people, and everyone's trying to get a selfie, and it's not exactly the best experience. So if you want to enjoy the beauty of the square, drink in the beauty, and take some photos without bumping elbows with other people, I recommend that you wake up early, okay, 6, 7 a.m., and go there first thing in the morning And then you can just drink in the beauty in peace, take some photos without having thousands of people in the background. Or the other thing I noticed, particularly about Venice, is that Venice tends to empty out in the evening. Most of the people who visit Venice are there only for the day. They're day trippers. So if you're staying in the city, I would schedule some time right after dinner or before dinner, right around that time, right before sunset, and it tends to really mellow out. And you can spend the rest of your day, say the bulk of your day, in other parts of the city that are less crowded than St. Mark's Square. So I think this really applies to most popular sites in Italy. So whether it be St. Mark's Square or in Florence, the piazza around the Duomo of Florence, same thing. It's flooded with people during the summer months, during the day. So go in the evening or early morning. If you wake up early in the morning and wander through the city, you'll notice photographers do the same thing. You'll see photographers with their gears running through the city, stopping and getting shots of famous, iconic buildings without tons of tourists in their shots. Another option to avoid lines and crowds is to pay a bit extra for a private tour. Useful websites, for example, like Get Your Guide, are a great place to find tours that include the price of tickets to popular sites. So, for example, a tour to the Duomo of Milan. It already has included in it the price of the ticket, so you don't have to stand in line and go through all that monkey business, or even get it online. Someone else is getting it for you, which is a nice time saver. Or, of course, on websites like Get Your Guide, you can avoid crowded areas and choose one of many, many different types of experiences that they offer, and get off the beaten path. So maybe if you are in a city that is just packed with people, you can choose a cooking class or some alternative experience than sitting in a crowd of people. My next tip is just to explore more. If you're in a place that is teeming with people, chances are if you walk a few blocks, you'll probably escape the crowds and you can explore a different part of the city. You know, as I've traveled in Italy, I see a common phenomenon that's very interesting, and that is that tourists tend to stay in the same areas of a city. I think it's something psychological. Maybe it's like a herd mentality. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but it's something I see. So, for example, here in Milan, I see that most tourists stay within just a few blocks of the city, and they never wander away or explore, I should say, other parts of the city. So they'll stay maybe around the area where the Duomo is. And yes, the area around the Duomo is fantastic. Lots to see there. But, you know, the city is big and there's all kinds of gems all around town just waiting to be discovered. So if you're in a place that is suffocating with crowds, you can explore a different area. I also have a tip for those of you who are visiting Italian beaches this summer. Maybe you're headed to Puglia's beautiful beaches or the Amalfi Coast this summer. The most important piece of advice I have for you is to avoid August at all costs. Why should you avoid August? Well, in Italy, there is this strange tradition that most Italians go on vacation at the same time. And that time is the month of August. I won't bore you with the details of why that is or the history of how it developed, but it's just how things work here. In August, the city's empty of Italians and they all head to the beaches or to the mountains. So if you have a trip to the beaches this summer, just go in June or July, or even honestly, even September is still nice to go to the beach in Italy, especially southern Italy. Southern Italy in particular is very nice, and still the water is warm in September. I also want to note something very important about restaurants during the high season. So I guess it doesn't really relate to crowds, but in a sense, you are avoiding crowds by not waiting for a table, perhaps. The thing is that in the summertime, it's best to make dinner reservations in advance, as you know, many places are just packed with people. So, a lot of restaurants allow you to make reservations on their websites, on Google, or on apps like The Fork. That's very helpful just to do it in advance. I mean, you can also, it's helpful because you can check out reviews. And don't fear if you don't speak Italian. In most popular areas of Italy, you're going to get someone who speaks some English, so just speak slowly. Well, friends, those are all the tips I have for you today. So even if you're traveling during high season, you can still have a wonderful experience using these tips. In the show notes, I'll add all the relevant links. I really hope this has been helpful. If it has been, please rate the show, share it with your travel buddies, and subscribe. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a buon viaggio. Ciao!